and welcome to this episode of the Future Worlds podcast. Today we're joined by Tamara. Hi Tamara, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, yeah, so as you said, I'm Tamara and I'm the founder of Amara Automotive. And what we do is, big picture, we're trying to make travel sustainable. And we're starting with the LSC, which is a four-wheel e-bike designed so that people can replace their cars in cities without any of the negatives of that cycling usually brings.
That's amazing. So how did you end up doing that from your degree? So like what were you doing before uni?
Before uni, I mean, my goal was to get into F1 and get quite big. I was aiming at team principal, so like no pressure there. And so from a really young age, I started doing as much as I could in motorsport, picked up a few different jobs. I was a mechanic for a few teams. And actually, when I was 15, I got accepted into my first sort of Formula One work experience, which was great. And that was mainly in the wind tunnel. So I spent a lot of time there and decided to pursue aerodynamics as a degree. And I came back to that team to do my industrial placement. So after my second year of university, and basically realized that actually when I was kind of part-time, it was really fun. But then going full-time into it, I realized actually Formula One's not the thing for me. There wasn't that like sort of distinct purpose or something necessarily positive coming from so much effort being put in. And so I always wanted to have a company in the future. I've been like designing cars, designing random vehicles since I was very young. But I decided to actually, after that year in industry, and I realized it's really not what I want to be doing for the next 20, 30 years before I plan to start my own thing. I decided to just leave and start my own thing whilst at uni.
And I remember, meeting you early on in your degree, and you were designing bespoke radio controlled boats, and you always had these kind of engineering hobbies that you've always worked on. Like, tell me about some of the pet projects that you were working on.
Yeah, the one you mentioned, I started actually during COVID lockdown, and just had a whole bunch of extra time. So before I only designed things on paper or in the computer, but I actually finally had the time to start building all of these little creations that I had. So it was actually my first boat that I ever designed. It was a hydrofoil, so it sort of glides on the water. Jet powered as well, so it sounded really cool. Electric jet. And I just, when I would test them in the parks, people would come up to me and say like, oh, I really want one, or like that would sell really well around Christmas. So I decided to try and sell them because I always wanted to have my own business in the future, and it was something to do as a little side hustle. And it went quite well. So they were all 3D printed, so it took a lot of time to make each one. And I basically built a website, launched a company during one of my exams, because we had an online exams then. So I was sitting for a 24-hour aerodynamic exam, launched the company, and then sold quite a few, sold 2 within the first hour of launching. So I had to start printing halfway through the exam. So that was great. Carried that on. That's when I had a meeting with you guys. And really started seeing actually there's so many opportunities for startups. There's so much funding available. And I was really looking at the company and thinking, well, actually, I don't care enough about this to put all that much work into actually scale it. It wasn't an idea that I wanted to scale. So I decided to kind of leave it where it was. And then that was before my placement. So then I went to do my placement and kind of focused on that. Partially, I was also building my own single-seater race car at that point when I started my placement. So it was all, many different projects going on. So I abandoned this sort of radio-controlled business at that point because it was just too much time, not enough. Again, there wasn't that sort of overlying purpose to it. It was just a bit of fun, and it wasn't really fulfilling me. And then same thing happened with Formula One. So then after I left that, I really wanted to figure out, well, I still had 2 years of uni left, and I figured out that actually this path I'm heading towards isn't something that's going to work. What can I do instead that will give me that purpose? So, which is when I founded Amara Automotive.
I mean, I love the fact that you not only launched your first company, but got your first customer orders during an exam here at university. How did the exam go? What result did you get for that?
I can't remember. I can't remember. It went well.
But I suppose it's really obvious, like you have this clear passion and like skill for engineering and making things and creating things. So I suppose, how did that translate when you're like, right, I found my passion, I found my motivation, but now I like want to make an actual business out of it? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, it's really quite difficult, because when beforehand, like the thing that I enjoyed the most is the design, the creation, the build. Sort of that process is so much fun. And when you try and make something commercial from the ground up, you basically disturb that entire process. It's no longer sort of self-contained and you can just do one stage, carrot, and move to the other. There's so many more things that you have to consider. And it was good that I had the previous business, because I kind of had an insight into it and I knew what would be coming. I knew that I couldn't just like start design and go from there, even though I tried to do that. So I designed something that was completely different to what I ended up with. And I actually went to the boot camp with super early on, after like probably working on it for like 2-3 weeks. I went to the boot camp and I had this freewheel vehicle that was super low to the ground. I just left motorsport, so like really high performance, low drag. And Ben was like, have you spoken to people? I was like, yeah. Some. And really there were so many concerns then. It was really good to actually just talk to like 60 people about the one idea, show them, and everyone, like there were so many overlying concerns about it. And I went away with your feedback and actually started going to events, talking to so many more people. I talked to hundreds of people just during that very early design stage, which is great because it saves so much time, rather than starting to build something immediately and then having to scrap it after many months of building and designing. Could do that at the start, and the vehicle's so different. It's got 4 wheels. It's really tall, same height as sort of sports cars on the roads right now, to address a lot of those concerns. And there's just so many different features. When you're designing something, there are, especially in a vehicle like this, which isn't as heavily regulated as cars because it's an e-bike, you have a lot of freedoms, which is so great after leaving F1, where you're just like, the regulations are insane. Insanely restrictive. It was great to have that freedom, but then you have so many decisions to make. So you could talk to people and basically answer all of those little decisions and basically just constrain yourself in more and more, so that you can actually end up with a vehicle that will do the job you need it to.
So, I mean, you've always worked on these pet projects. You love building and designing, like you said. What did you find most difficult about starting that process of talking to people, going to events, engaging with potential customers and getting their feedback?
Well, I mean, first, I'm quite an introvert. I don't really enjoy talking to, like going to these big events, like meeting people that I don't know. So there's definitely, like at the start, there were a lot of nerves about that, and about, well, how will people perceive this? Because it's quite it's the company is sort of my baby, the product itself, the LSE is my baby. I'm really I don't know, emotionally,
emotionally
invested
attached,
invested in it. Yeah. Exactly, yeah. So you don't want to just have constant negative feedback. But it's all about also just what questions you can ask. So learning to ask the right questions, so you're not leading people on, but so they don't just give you a jumble of ideas or feedback, which is completely random. So you really need to, and just learning who to actually listen to, because there's different groups of people based on different events. I was already in a group of cyclists who loved the first concept because they're all about performance and they love that stuff, but it's not my target market. And so depending on where I went, I would get feedback for kind of different applications of the vehicle, where people thought, oh, turn it into a camper, that would be really cool. So it can do really long distance rides. And it's so wildly different to what I'm trying to do. So yeah, that was an interesting learning curve of also just learning who to listen to, who to engage with, and how to frame the conversation, so that you could just figure out actually what does that particular person care about, where do they fall in terms of the sort of different customer segments, and then should I take their feedback, like how much should I listen to based on what they're saying.
So as an introvert who's perhaps most comfortable in the workshop designing your engineering product, then first going out and talking to loads of different customers and potential users, what did you find most helpful for you to get over some of those hurdles and perhaps your own fears and apprehension?
I mean, it's difficult to explain an idea that's so different, because when I tell people now, four-wheeled e-bike that's fully covered, people, I don't know what they imagine, but I don't think it's what I showed them, because then when I showed them the picture or a model of what my vehicle is, it's always like a really like taken aback positive reaction. And so having a model, I would always bring a little model. I don't have one with me today, I'm sorry.
It's the first time I've seen you without
it. I would bring that with me, and it's just so much easier to have a conversation when you're not trying to imagine something, you can see it, so you don't have to, the person you're talking to doesn't have to spend all that time thinking of actually what does this thing even look like. But so they have to do that bit of thinking, and then they can start thinking, well, do I like it or not? And you're not sure if they actually understand what you're talking about. Whereas if you can show them something, and it's just so much clearer. And so yeah, definitely for hardware products, it works so well, and it's such an like conversation opener. You just like pull out a little model and be like, talk about this. What do you think? Type of thing.
So something that we know our startup founders find really hard is that kind of like balancing their maybe studies with their startup, with their just general life. And I suppose an excellent example of that is trying to launch a company whilst you're in the middle of an exam. So I suppose, and last year on the cohort as well, I know you were like super busy, had everything going on. So how do you manage that? Like, how do you cope with that? Because long term, how much can you sustain that?
Yeah. So, I mean, last year was hectic. I worked insane hours. Like I was 16-hour days were normal for me, mostly focused on the company, squeeze in university stuff when I had to near the deadlines. And it worked for that year, but it was very it wasn't a pleasant thing. I realized after I had like burnt out quite badly towards the end of last year. And yeah, I also was finishing the year and had this grant that started. And so managing that project whilst managing the overall running of the company was really difficult. So yeah, I'm still learning. I'm set myself clear hours. I don't do crazy days anymore. I try and take at least one day off a week. But it's difficult because once you have the energy, it's so difficult to stop yourself. I did a lot in that. Yeah, like as a solo founder, you have to. There's just a lot of work to get through, and if you're alone, then you're the one who has to pull all that weight. And so while it worked and while I felt good, it was great because I could power through so many things. But then as I was starting to really get burnt out, like something that would usually take 20 minutes would take me about 2 hours. And it was just so demotivating and like almost like soul crushing. Like it was really difficult. But yeah, I've tried to reset with a lot of advice from previous founders who have like all gone through such a similar thing. So you can, take their word for it really, because they like the few people who actually know what it's like. Because a lot of people, like you talk to people who don't have a company, don't really have an interest in starting one, and they'll just like, just don't work as hard. And it's really easy to say, like it's so much easier said than done. And so yeah, I got a lot of advice to just basically like simple things that you hear all the time. But it's been quite a challenge trying to integrate them. So I have clear hours of that I'm not allowed to work outside of basically right now. So and it's working. I'm definitely a lot less stressed. Things are going faster than when I was burnt out, but still slower than when I was working crazy hours, and I just need to I'm still learning to like deal with that and not not let that aspect of it like stress me out and push me into like just overworking again. But yeah.
What were some of the signs that made you realize, okay, this has gone too far? I'm getting close to burnout.
I basically would like black out. Like I'd really struggle to focus. And almost my mind would just I'd be trying to do one thing and my mind would just black out, and I would just like sit in the same place for a while and then realize like I'd pull out of it and be like, oh, well, my mind just went down. Like probably not even a blackout. It's probably more overthinking about different things, because if you're working so many different types of jobs at once and really trying to do a decent job at all of them, you constantly sort of overthink something that you're not focused on right now. So I really lost that focus of just being able to do the task I'm doing right now, and my mind would just go into this space of just thinking about everything else I need to get done. And yeah, that would get stressful. I had to have like 3 lists to manage my time, and that was insane. So I've like cut that completely, and now I've just taken the approach of just focusing on sort of one big task, just doing one type of job long term, and then getting that, like reaching the milestone that needs to be reached, and then focusing on a different sort of job, which is like the same type of thing, rather than jumping from designer to builder to pitching to all of these different hats.
Yeah, so you're not context switching the whole time and mentally having to switch.
Yeah, because that got really difficult. It used to, at the start it was fine. Like I could do it like this and switch those roles multiple times every day. But it got to a point where it was just so exhausting mentally, without really realizing that that's what it is. Like it was difficult. I had to really figure out actually what is causing this sort of lack of focus and like blanking.
It's one of the challenges, isn't it? It can sneak up on you and
definitely.
slowly, and you just
you won't realize because you're still
it.
like there's still so many things to do. So even if you're there's so many things to think about, and it's always more fun to think about something that you want to work on rather than just like reflecting on yourself and just like so it's just one of those that does sneak up on you.
I guess that's difficult as well as a sole founder, as you say, all the pressure's on you because there's no one else to do it. But have you like built up your team or done anything to try and alleviate some of those burdens?
Last year I had about 7 people in the team. But none full time, which was the tricky bit. So I had some interns, I had some people who were working on the grant project with me, and people are great, but you also need to manage all the people. And what happened with that was it was a great learning experience, and my interns were amazing. But overall, just really focusing on actually what was really necessary with the company, I decided to basically just cut back to just me working on it, because now kind of the things we were working on, it made sense, but now it's just sort of very technical build of the prototype and finishing off. So all of the design's been done, most of the things are built. It's kind of final assembly time right now, and just figuring some of the main things out right now. And I couldn't basically afford anyone full-time, and you really need a full-time person, so you're not constantly spending a lot of time kind of bringing that person up to speed and managing them and managing different time scales for things. And I needed someone who was like really skilled in a very specific area, and you can't find that person who's willing to work part-time with that sort of skill. So it's that sort of balance. So I looking at that, and I thought, well, actually, I would rather finish this build of the prototype in a bit a slower way, like me doing it, but at least I know that all of the technical aspects will be up to scratch and will be able to really swiftly progress to high volume production. I'll know all of the problems are, I know the processes for everything. And when I get funding in to be able to actually build up a full-time team, we'll be in a much better position to make that step, rather than doing it immediate or needed to raise right now without having that prototype built.
Having a team is great for spreading the load once they're productive and once you know the quality's there, but getting to that point can be really difficult.
Yeah, and especially if you're working mainly with interns or working on sort of short. The grant was only 6 months, so like your times together are limited, so it's so difficult to put as much resource as you would need because it's like finite. Yeah.
And you spoke about this grant. It was an Innovate UK grant.
Yeah.
Tell us how you managed to get hold of that. You just graduated just last year and you already had this Innovate UK grant. What did that look like? What did it enable you to do? How did you win it?
Yeah, so it was the Transformative Technologies grant. And again, it was kind of, I didn't know about it until like 6 days, until the last 6 days of the submission. I was inducting one of my interns, and that was part of his job role to look at these. And I was just showing him the Innovate UK website, and we were like, actually, well, this one looks good. I was like, yeah, this one actually looks really good. We fit right in the category with one of our composite technologies, and we're like, oh, the deadline's in 6 days. And I was like, you know what? Drop the induction. You'll get inducted like actually doing. So let's start writing the application. And so that was a quick turnaround. And I think that was sort of in March time. So I was still a student, still studying full time. So yeah, got through the application really quickly. It was basically full time, 6 days, just getting that written because they are quite long. And got the good news, which was awesome. And it was a fully funded grant, so we didn't actually have to raise anything to match fund. We just had to be able to prove that we had some money in the bank to spend beforehand. But they gave you, I think, about 70% of the money up front anyway. So it's a really great way to get into it without needing to do a big raise. And so with that grant, we were developing our chassis sandwich panel technology, so using recycled face sheets for our sandwich panels for high volume production. So it was something that actually we didn't need to do at that exact stage of the overall project. It's something we would have done later, but the money was available then. And that money did allow us to do that project, partner with these big companies who we plan on continuing work with. And that grant also brought credibility to the company. And it was a great thing to do. But again, it started before I even graduated. So the project started, I still had a few exams left to do. And that was like a really stressful period because I was running the company as a whole, trying to finish the prototype, plus working on this almost separate project because it wasn't going directly towards the prototype, although we did do a lot of the testing that we needed for certification of our vehicle. So it was just sort of doing a milestone that was a bit further ahead really quickly, and that changed the timeline of things, which is still why we had to basically pause the work on the prototype, focus on that, and did a really good job on that and finished it successfully. But it was a challenging one. It was a good thing, and the money was so helpful to just keep the company rolling and manage to do that project. But the timing was quite difficult. Looking back on it, it was still a positive thing, but it did bring a lot of additional stress. And that's really like the thing that pushed me into that sort of burnout, because I was still trying to run the company as usual.
So you've obviously made loads of progress last year. Like you say, you're super busy, you've got your grant, everything's going on. So what does 2024 look like for you? Like what kind of milestones are you trying to hit this year?
Yeah, so 2024 is exciting, much more fun hopefully than last year was. But we're finishing off the prototype, and once that's done, it's a fully functional prototype. It's not like an MVP. We have quite a few we're going to switch the focus on PR, putting ourselves in the best place to raise towards the later part of this year. And we have a few trips planned basically throughout the UK and throughout Europe, which we'll have more information on soon. But really doing a big PR push and letting all of the people that have been dying to test ride one, giving everyone that opportunity, and really just putting it in the public's eye and showing that actually this is an alternative, like a viable alternative to driving.
I hope we're going to be seeing one in future worlds.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
And so just tell us a little bit more about the LSE. Like it's your passion. It's like you said, it's your baby.
Yeah.
Tell us about it. Why is it going to be so transformational, and why are you so passionate about it?
When I was trying to figure out, after I left Formula, like, what do I want to do? I've always been so aware of climate change as a whole. I think we all are, but I always felt that I had some sort of responsibility to do something about it. I don't really know why, but that's like was an overarching feeling. And I was like, well, how can I combine this passion for building very novel vehicles that don't exist? How can I very creatively apply those skills to this big problem? And what we need, based on the journeys that people make, where most of the time we're alone driving for very short journeys in a 2-ton vehicle, which is designed for 5 people, and you could potentially like walk or run those journeys if you wanted to, but it would take so long. Where when you cycle them, especially in cities and urban areas where there's so much traffic, and you can skip that traffic with cycling, it just makes so much sense. And it's just so almost frustrating that it's not something that's more adopted, but you can see why. Because of the weather, because of the lack of safety of bikes, and also the lack of infrastructure. It's basically what our take on this, because people have tried to do this before. It's our take that is actually just overall an upgrade. You're upgrading the sort of commuting experience. And when you're upgrading something like a commuting experience, when you're providing like something that's even better than a car, to do that, it should be a no-brainer. So that's really what we're trying to do. And like our product, from the feedback that we've been given, it seems like we've really hit the nail on the head, and it should be that no-brainer. It's just now about making it a reality. So we're at that exciting stage where we are sure that the product will do great. We've done so much work to prove that and to design it in such a way. And it's now just about getting it finished, getting it out there, and starting to make that impact. So
thank you so much, Tamara. I really enjoyed having you on our podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us on another Future Worlds podcast with our special guest, Tamara. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, please do get in touch.